3 men attacked a mafia boss over a bill, but the waitress's tattoo stopped the fight. Friday night at La Serena on the pier, from the dining room, you saw the lights of the container ships moving slowly in the black water of Harborview, New Jersey. From the kitchen, you smelled garlic hitting hot olive oil, the sharp brine of oysters on ice, and the deep, greasy sizzle of the fry station. Olivia Rivera moved between those two worlds. The air in the dining room was different. It smelled like money. Old money smelled like expensive wool coats and faint, dusty perfume. New money smelled like sharp cologne and leather conditioner. And then there was the money that sat near the bar, the money that came from the private transporters who used the pier long after the last tourists left. That money smelled like damp cigars and the metallic tang of impatience. Olivia, at 26 years old, knew the difference. She worked the tables nearest the bar, the section everyone else tried to avoid. The heels on her black service shoes were worn down on one side, a constant reminder of the miles she walked on this plush carpet, carrying trays of Clams Casino and overpriced Barolo to men who didn't look at her face. She wasn't a naive girl. Harborview didn't make naive girls, especially not ones raised by their grandparents in the shadow of the docks. She saw the world exactly as it was, a series of transactions. She served them grilled octopus. They gave her money. She gave that money to the pulmonary rehab center for her grandfather, and they gave him another day of breathing exercises. She used what was left to pay for her part-time nursing program, hoping to one day trade the tray for a set of scrubs. The men near the bar liked her. She was fast. She remembered who drank scotch and who drank vodka, and most importantly, she never heard anything she wasn't supposed to. Her face was a perfect mask of polite service, but tonight was wrong. The tension started the moment he walked in. Luca DiMaggio, 38 years old, and the man who ran the entire night logistics network for the Eastern Seaboard. He wasn't supposed to be here. La Serena was Luciano Quarters' territory, a local arrangement. The owner paid Luciano for security, and Luciano's crew ate for free. DiMaggio, however, was the head of the DiMaggio Port Cooperative. He wasn't local. He was the competition, the shark swimming upstream into the river, and he was stealing Luciano's clients one container at a time. And tonight, he was alone. No crew, no visible bodyguards, just a black sedan idling out on the street, its engine a low rumble beneath the smooth jazz playing over the restaurant speakers. The shift manager, Miguel, saw him, went pale, and immediately busied himself with a stack of menus. The head chef peeked through the diamond window of the kitchen door and ducked back, cursing in Spanish. The table, a prime booth overlooking the water, was in Olivia's section. "Rivera," Miguel hissed, not looking at her. "Table 4. Olivia smoothed her apron. "Fine." She grabbed a water carafe. Inside her head, she was calculating. A man like that, alone, was either sending a message or expecting trouble. Either way, he might tip big to prove a point. A 20% tip on a check that would surely hit 3 figures would cover her grandfather's copay for his heart medication. She approached the table, the service smile clicking into place. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" Luca DiMaggio looked up. He didn't look like a harbor tough. He wore a deep blue suit, impeccably tailored, Italian. The watch on his wrist was gold and flashed too brightly under the low amber lights. His face was angular, handsome in a severe way, but marred by a single, paper-thin scar that ran from his temple to the edge of his eye. It wasn't a knife scar. It was the neat, precise line of a surgeon's scalpel. "A bottle of your best Chianti," he said. His voice was quiet, a gravelly baritone that cut right through the clatter of silverware. "And the calamari?" Olivia nodded, her smile fixed. As she poured his water, her right wrist came into the light. On the delicate skin of her inner wrist was a small, stylized tattoo of a phoenix, its wings spread. Beneath it, in delicate script, was a Latin phrase, "Sempre portu," always from the port. She got it 2 years ago. Her grandfather used to tell her stories of the old Harborview rescue squads, the sailors who went out in any storm. It was their motto. She got it to honor him, to remind herself where she came from while she was trying so desperately to get out. Luca DiMaggio's eyes locked onto the ink. He didn't move. He didn't speak, but Olivia, practiced in reading the micro-expressions of demanding customers, saw it, his shoulders, which had been relaxed against the leather booth, tensed. His gaze didn't just see the tattoo, it read it. A flicker of something cold and sharp passed through his eyes before he looked back at the menu. "That will be right out," Olivia said, her voice even. She turned and walked away, the skin on her back prickling. She felt his gaze follow her all the way to the bar. She didn't know what just happened, but the shift in the air was undeniable. The restaurant was packed, the kitchen sizzled, the music played on. But at table 4, a man who shouldn't be there had just seen a piece of history on the wrist of a waitress who knew nothing of its true meaning. The surface of the night was perfect, polished and bright, but underneath, something very old and very dangerous had just been disturbed. The calm lasted until 9:15. The heavy glass doors of La Sirena opened, letting in a blast of cold, wet air and 3 men who did not belong. They were young, mid-20s, and loud, draped in the kind of designer streetwear that screams new money, or, in their case, someone else's money. Damon Dime Keller, Luis Prado, and Corey Hux. They were Luciano Quarter's part-time headaches, small-time vandals kept on a short leash to rough up businesses that were late on protection payments. Olivia knew the type. They were seated in her section, 2 tables away from DiMaggio. They immediately started ordering top-shelf tequila and the most expensive items on the menu: lobster, Wagyu, more tequila. They talked loudly, laughing, with Luis filming the table, the food, and, pointedly, the back of Luca DiMaggio's head. Luca never turned around. He just continued eating his calamari, sipping his wine, a portrait of unnerving calm. Olivia's internal meter was flashing red. This was a performance. They were here on orders. Luciano's crew had obviously been tipped off that DiMaggio was eating alone on their turf, and they'd been sent to make it loud. After 40 minutes of obnoxious behavior, Damon waved Olivia over. "We're done here," he slurred, pushing a stack of plates away. "Get us the check. And, give it to him." He jerked a thumb toward Luca's booth. Luis Prado giggled, raising his phone to record the interaction. "Yeah," Luis added. "The big boss over there told us he's covering the whole section tonight. A gesture of goodwill." Right. The restaurant, which had been buzzing, went quiet. The kitchen clatter stopped. Even the jazz trio seemed to hit a sour note. Olivia's service smile twitched. This was the moment her night officially went bad. She glanced at the kitchen, where Miguel, the manager, was frantically shaking his head, signaling for her to just smooth it over. She turned to Luca. His face was unreadable. He had placed his fork down. "Sir," Olivia started, her voice tight. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstand." "He heard me," Damon snapped, standing up. He was shorter than Olivia expected, but broad. "You covering this, or not?" Luca DiMaggio slowly placed his napkin on the table. He didn't look at Damon. He looked at Olivia. "Bring me my check," he said, his voice quiet. Then, he turned his gaze to Damon. The shift was glacial and terrifying. "I'm not paying for you." It was a flat dismissal. No anger, no negotiation, just a fact. Damon's face turned a blotchy red. He was being humiliated, and his friend was filming it. This was not how the clip was supposed to go. "You think you're too good?" Damon shouted, shoving his own chair back. "You come onto our pier, disrespect us." He snatched the heavy, leather-bound menu from his table. "You arrogant—" He slammed the menu down, not on his table, but on Luca's, as if to make a point. The move was clumsy, fueled by cheap tequila and bravado. The edge of the menu slammed directly into the base of Luca's full wine glass. Dark red Chianti exploded upward, a violent spray that soaked the lapel in front of Luca's perfectly tailored blue suit. Silence. In the kitchen doorway, 2 massive line cooks, Luciano's unofficial muscle tensed. They grabbed meat tenderizers, but they stopped, caught in an impossible bind. Attacking DiMaggio was a death sentence. But letting Luciano's men attack DiMaggio in Luciano's own house was a betrayal. They hesitated, trapped. Luca rose slowly from the booth. His suit was ruined. The wine dripped onto the carpet. His eyes were locked on Damon, and all the quiet civility was gone. Olivia saw, with absolute clarity, that Luca could break Damon's arm in 2 places before the man even had time to scream. The sheer, controlled violence radiating from him was a physical force, but he didn't move. His jaw clenched. He was on enemy territory, in a restaurant that served as a useful, neutral money laundering hub. A brawl here would be messy, bad for business. He was calculating the cost. Damon, emboldened by Luca's lack of immediate retaliation, puffed out his chest and raised his hand, index finger extended, to shove Luca. "You see that, you see what you made me." Olivia moved. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was trying to save her paycheck. She saw the night ending in sirens, a closed restaurant, and 0 tip. She saw her grandfather's prescription bottle, empty. "Stop it," she yelled, stepping directly between the 2 men. She had a round tray in her left hand, loaded with the empty coffee cups from a nearby table. She shoved it onto a chair and used her right hand to execute the move she used a dozen times a night on drunk bar patrons: grab the offending arm and apply leverage. She seized Damon's wrist, pulling it down hard. "You need to leave." Now, it happened fast. Her sudden movement, the weight of her body pulling his arm, and the slickness of a spilled drink on the floor made her twist. The heavy ceramic coffee mug she'd just cleared, still hot with dregs, slid off the tray. She juggled it, and in the motion, the cuff of her white uniform shirt, damp and loose, caught and snagged. The fabric ripped down her forearm, exposing the pale skin underneath, all the way from her wrist to her elbow, and the tattoo. The hot coffee splashed onto Damon's hand. He yelped, pulling back, "Bitch, you—" But the word died in his throat. He stared at her arm. The anger on his face dissolved, replaced by a sudden, sickly white shock. Luis Prado, his phone still raised, lowered it instantly. Corey Hucks, the 3rd man, took 2 quick steps back, knocking over a chair. They weren't looking at her. They were looking at the ink. The small phoenix, its wings spread, and the clear Latin motto beneath it, Semper Portu. Every man who worked the Harborview docks knew that crest, even if only from whispers. It was the mark of the Port Seraphs, the legendary rescue crew from the old days, the crew that, in a brutal storm in 1989, had saved Luciano Corder's father from the wreckage of a sinking freighter. In the local underworld, the Seraphs were saints. Their symbol was a protected relic. It was the one thing you did not touch, did not disrespect, did not harm. And Damon had just laid hands on a woman who bore it. But the thugs weren't the only ones who had frozen. Luca DiMaggio, his suit still dripping red, was staring at her wrist with an intensity that chilled Olivia to the bone. His shock was different. It wasn't reverence. It was recognition. That phrase. It was engraved on the inside of his dead sister's locket, a secret memorial, a piece of his family's private grief that almost no one alive knew. The standoff was broken. The fight that the title promised had been stopped cold by nothing more than a few lines of ink. Damon, now sweating, scrambled to recover. He yanked his arm back from Olivia, not in anger, but in fear. "Hey," he stammered, looking past her to Luca. We just thought you were covering. You know our mistake. We're good." He fumbled in his pocket, threw a wad of cash onto his own table, far more than the bill, and grabbed his friends. "We're leaving. We're good." They fled the restaurant. Olivia stood there, breathing heavily, her torn sleeve hanging off her arm, the adrenaline drained, leaving her shaking. She looked at the mess, at Luca's ruined suit. "Sir, I am so sorry," she stammered. "Let me get some club soda." "Don't," Luca commanded. His voice was low, strained. He wasn't looking at the stain. He wasn't looking at the fleeing men. He was looking at her arm. To Luca. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a random waitress with a nostalgic tattoo. This was a signal. Either an enemy was provoking him with the ghost of his sister, or this girl was tangled in a history he thought he had buried 15 years ago. The restaurant snapped back to life. but it was a different, sharper noise. Miguel, the manager, scurried over, his face ashen, clutching a handful of bar towels. "Mr. DiMaggio, please, the meal is on the house. Let us handle the dry cleaning. Olivia, you're done for the night. Clock out. Go." Olivia reached to steady her shaking hands, her torn sleeve a glaring white flag of surrender. She was happy to go. She wanted to be miles away from here. "She's not going anywhere," Luca DiMaggio said. He didn't look at Miguel. His voice was flat, and it carried absolute authority. He dropped a $100 bill onto the table, more than enough to cover his own meal. "You," he said. Finally looking at Olivia, his eyes were dark, all traces of the earlier confrontation gone, replaced by a cold, analytical focus. "With me, 10 minutes. It was not a request. He turned and walked, not toward the front entrance, but toward the steel service door at the back, the one that led past the dumpsters and onto the pier. Olivia's feet felt glued to the floor. "I don't work for you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Miguel shot her a look of pure terror. "Miss Rivera, just go with him. Please, 10 minutes. She looked at Miguel's panicked face. She thought of the men who had just fled, terrified of her tattoo. She thought of Luca, who had looked at it with something other than fear. And then, as always, she thought of the bill from the rehab center sitting on her kitchen counter. Whatever this was, it was attached to a man who threw $100 bills at problems. She kept her chin up, pushed past the manager, and followed him. The heavy door shut behind them, cutting off the warmth and the noise of the restaurant instantly. The air out here was cold, smelling of salt, diesel fuel, and the low-tide funk of the pilings. A single, weak yellow security light cast long, distorted shadows on the wet wooden planks. Luca had walked to the railing, his back to her. His expensive suit was a ruin of red wine stains, but he stood as if he were wearing armor. He stared out at the dark water, at the distant, glittering lights of the cargo ships. Olivia waited. She wrapped her arms around herself, partly from the cold, partly to hide her torn sleeve. She would not show him she was scared. "The tattoo," he said, without turning. "Talk. It's just a tattoo." He turned, and he was closer than she expected. He had moved silently. The weak yellow light caught the faint scar at his temple. "I don't like coincidences, and I don't like games. You have one chance to tell me who you are." "I'm a waitress," she snapped, her frustration overriding her fear. "My name is Olivia Rivera. I'm trying to pay for nursing school and keep my grandfather's lungs working. That's who I am." "And the tattoo?" His voice was dangerously soft. "My abuelo," she said, her voice thick with defensiveness. "He worked these docks his whole life. He was part of an old rescue crew, the Port Seraphs. He used to take me to the ceremonies honoring them when I was a kid. He told me their motto, Sempre Portu, always from the port. I got it to make him proud, to motivate him through his rehab. That's it. It's for my grandfather." She finished, breathless. Her story sounding thin and stupid in the face of this man's silent intensity. Luca watched her face, searching her eyes for any sign of a lie. He saw none. He saw frustration, exhaustion, and a defiant pride. He saw the truth. The tension in his shoulders eased. The suspicion in his eyes didn't disappear, but it shifted, turning into something else. Curiosity. A deep, unsettling interest. "He's right to be proud," Luca said, his voice changing. It was still rough, but the predatory edge had softened. "That crew, they saved my father's life, a long time ago. Pulled him from a wreck not half a mile from here." Olivia blinked. This was not the confession she was expecting. He looked down at her wrist, which she was still clutching. "My sister," he said, and the name seemed to cost him something. "Alessia. She had the same tattoo, in the same place." He paused. "She's gone. That's why I looked. You brought a ghost into my dinner." Suddenly, the night shifted. He wasn't just a cold, terrifying crime boss. He was a man with a memory, a pain. He was a man who, in his own way, had just seen his sister's sigil on her arm and had, for a moment, been thrown. And he had, by his very presence. kept those 3 idiots from putting their hands on her again. The first flicker of a dangerous attraction, the kind that starts in the stomach, began to uncurl. "So you work this floor," he said, changing the subject. "Back to business. You're smart enough for nursing school, but you're here, serving drinks to scum like that." "I told you." "Money," she said, meeting his gaze. "The classes are during the day. The hospital internships are unpaid, and my grandfather needs medication that costs more than my rent. This job pays in cash. It pays tonight." He nodded, a small sign of respect. He appreciated the bluntness. No tears, no sob story, just facts. "You've got a problem, Olivia," he said. "I've got several. You're one of them." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Those 3 men, they're Luciano Quarters. They're stupid, but they're his. They're going to tell him what they saw. They're going to describe that tattoo." "It's a memorial," she insisted. "It has nothing to do with him." "It has everything to do with him now," Luca corrected her. "You stepped in. You showed it. Now. It's part of the story." He stepped closer. "You want to pay those bills, all of them," she tensed. "What are you talking about? Your grandfather's medical care, your tuition, all of it. I'll have it paid, in full, by tomorrow." Olivia's heart hammered. That was an impossible amount of money, a life-changing amount. "Why?" "I need an internal liaison at La Serena," he said. The words sounding harmless, corporate. "It's a neutral spot, but Luciano is getting sloppy. I want to know who comes in, who they talk to. You're perfect, you're invisible, and you don't ask questions, just eyes and ears." She saw it, the hook, the clean, simple offer that would pull her right into the dark water he lived in. "No," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm offering you a new life." "I'm already building my new life," Olivia said, her voice shaking but firm. "I want to be a nurse. I want a normal life. I don't want to be a spy. I don't want to be... whatever this is. I'm not for sale." Luca looked at her for a long moment. He should have been angry. She was refusing him. Instead, he looked intrigued. He respected the steal. "A normal life," he repeated, as if tasting the words. He almost laughed. "Your grandfather was a seraph. My sister wore their mark. You got it inked on your skin. You were never going to have a normal life." He didn't try to force her. He didn't grab her. He just held her gaze. "I'll be back tomorrow night," he said, "for dessert. Think it over. Think about those bills. That tattoo linked you to my business. Ragazza." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness toward the idling sedan. Olivia was left alone on the pier, the cold wind whipping her torn sleeve, his final word echoing in her ears. She was already bound to him. News in Harborview travels faster than a shorebird in a headwind. By sunrise, every bookie, bartender, and dock worker knew the story Luca DiMaggio, eating alone on Luciano Quarters' turf, had been fronted by 3 of Luciano's own men. And the fight only stopped because a waitress got in the way. Luciano Quarter heard it and went purple. He didn't see an accident. He saw a setup. He saw DiMaggio, that uptown snake, staging the entire event to make his crew look like incompetent children who could be scared off by a 26-year-old girl. And this story about a tattoo. That was the part that worried him. It was a detail too specific, too strange. He gave the order, find the waitress with the ink, find out who she is and who she really works for. The next night, Olivia's shift was a 9-hour-long anxiety attack. She kept waiting for Luca DiMaggio to walk in, to sit at table 4 and order dessert, but his chair remained empty. Miguel, the manager, avoided her. Her fellow servers gave her wide, fearful looks. She was marked. She clocked out at 2:17 a.m. The employee parking lot was poorly lit, located behind the restaurant next to the humming industrial freezers. The air was thick with the smell of old fish. She walked fast, keys clutched between her knuckles, her worn-out shoes scraping on the gravel. She was 10 feet from her rusty Honda Civic when the headlights flashed on. A black SUV, a late-model Escalade with no front plate, had been parked silently in the shadows. It now blocked her way. The engine turned over, a deep, predatory growl. 2 doors opened. Not Luciano's 3 idiots from last night. These were different men. older, thicker, dressed in black windbreakers. They didn't run at her. They just moved, flanking her. "Olivia Rivera," one of them said. It wasn't a question. "Luciano wants to ask you about your ink." She didn't scream. She didn't have time. She spun, trying to run back toward the restaurant, but the second man grabbed her arm, her right arm. His fingers dug into her bicep, and he yanked her back. "Don't be stupid," he grunted, pulling her toward the open door of the SUV. "Get off me," she yelled, slamming her heel into his shin. He cursed and backhanded her. The blow sent her stumbling, her vision exploding in white stars, the gravel tearing at her palms as she fell. Before the man could grab her again, a third voice cut through the night. "I wouldn't." A man stepped out from behind the restaurant's grease trap, moving with a fluid silence that was terrifying. He was tall, lean, and wore a simple dark hoodie. Olivia had never seen him before. The two men from the SUV turned, surprised. "Who the hell are you?" "Santo Vega," the man said, as if it should mean something. "And Mr. DiMaggio is very specific. You don't touch his people." The first thug lunged, pulling something metallic from his pocket. Santo moved. It wasn't a brawl. It was an equation. He intercepted the man's arm, twisted it. There was a wet, heavy crack of bone. The man screamed and dropped. The second man, the one who had hit Olivia, hesitated. Santo didn't. He closed the distance in one step and drove his fist into the man's throat. The man didn't scream. He just made a choked, gargling sound and collapsed, clawing at his neck. It was over in less than 5 seconds. Olivia was still on the ground, staring, her cheek throbbing. Santo Vega looked down at her, his expression unreadable. He offered a hand. "You're bleeding." Who are you?" "I'm the guy who keeps your nights from ending like this," he said. He pulled her to her feet and shoved her, none too gently, toward the street. "Luca's car is waiting." Luca's black sedan was there, just as it had been the night before, engine idling. Santo opened the back door. "Get in." She got in. The car smelled of rich leather and Luca DiMaggio. He was in the back, sitting as if he owned the night. He looked at her torn uniform, the blood on her chin, and the red, rising mark on her cheek. His jaw was a block of granite. "He's taking care of it," Luca said. He meant Santo. The car pulled away just as Santo finished his work, leaving the two men groaning in the gravel. They drove in silence, not to her apartment, but up, into the hills overlooking the bay, to a tower of glass and steel that pierced the fog, the penthouse. The elevator opened directly into his apartment. Olivia had never seen anything like it. The walls were all glass, 360 degrees, showing the entire glittering, indifferent sprawl of harbor view below. The furniture was minimal, black and chrome. An open kitchen featured a wine fridge taller than she was, and on a polished steel shelf, next to a row of antique books, was a sleek, biometric weapons safe. This was his world, wealth built on unseen things, a place of controlled, sterile danger. She stood in the middle of the marble floor, shaking, the adrenaline finally giving way to rage. "You knew," she whispered, turning on him. "You knew they'd come for me." "I guessed," he said, walking past her to the kitchen, pouring brandy into 2 glasses. "You guessed." Her voice cracked, rising. "And you just let them. You let them wait for me. I got a job. That's all. I'm serving pasta to gangsters. And now I'm a target. I did not sign up for this." He stopped, his back to her. "No, you didn't." He turned around. He didn't offer her the drink. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something under the cold control, a flicker of raw, unguarded emotion. "I need you alive," he said, his voice low, "and not for the reasons you think." He walked toward her. "That tattoo, my sister, Alessia. I told you she had it. She died 15 years ago. A warehouse explosion, the police, the feds. Everyone ruled it an accident. Bad wiring." He was standing in front of her now, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, to smell the faint, expensive cologne. "I never believed it," he said. "I believed she was murdered. But I had no proof, no leads, for 15 years. Nothing." And he looked at her face, his eyes tracing the new bruise. "And then you walk into my life. You, with her exact mark on your arm, stepping in front of a gun, just like she would have. It's not a coincidence. It's a key. You're the key. Olivia, that tattoo is opening a door I thought was welded shut. He was admitting it. He needed her. The tension in the room was so thick she could barely breathe. The space between them crackled. Her heart was hammering, not from fear, but from this terrible magnetic pull. He reached out, his hand infinitely gentle, and cupped her chin, his thumb brushing the blood from her lip. Luciano marked you. You're a loose end he has to tie. So what am I? She whispered, her voice trembling. Bait. His eyes darkened. You're under my protection. He let go of her chin, but his hand didn't move away. It went to her arm, his fingers closing around her right wrist. He lifted it, turning it over, bringing the tattoo up between them, his gaze fixed on the ink. Sempre por tu. He breathed. His thumb moved, tracing the outline of the phoenix's wing. His touch was rough, calloused, but it sent a shock of pure heat straight up her arm. She could feel his pulse, or maybe it was her own, thudding in her veins. She watched his dark head bend, his focus entirely on her skin. He lowered his mouth and pressed his lips to the tattoo. It wasn't a soft kiss. It was a brand, possessive, hot, acclaiming. Olivia's breath hitched, and her knees went weak. He raised his head, his eyes locked on hers, his lips still damp, still touching her skin. She found her voice, though it was shaky. She would not be this man's possession. She would not be a perk of the job. If you want me alive, she said, her voice clear in the quiet room, don't make me your temporary girlfriend. I'm not one of your assets. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It was the first real smile she had ever seen from him. He laughed, a short, rough sound. Temporary, he said, his thumb still stroking her pulse point. Ragazza, I don't do temporary. If I truly touch you. He paused, his meaning clear. I'll want to keep you, and I keep what's mine. It was a confession and a threat, tangled together. He let go of her wrist, stepping back. The connection was broken, and the air rushed back into her lungs. Luciano has marked you, he said. All business again. Your apartment isn't safe. Your job isn't safe. Your normal life is over. He picked up a phone from the counter. Santo is waiting downstairs. He's taking you to a safe house. You'll stay there until I've handled this. She started to protest, to talk about her grandfather, her classes, but he held up a hand. Your grandfather is already being looked after. My own nurse is with him now. Your school will be informed you're on a medical leave of absence. He had already done it. He had cut her old life away in the space of an hour. She was trapped. She was protected. She was his. The safe house was not a concrete bunker. It was worse. It was a cage made of glass and cedar, perched on a desolate stretch of coast in North Seabright, a wealthy enclave that didn't show up on public maps. Santo drove her there in silence, and when he left, the gate hissed shut with the finality of a vault. The entire back of the house was a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Atlantic. The glass, Luca explained when he arrived hours later, was 3 inches thick, bulletproof. Her first night was spent in a state of numb panic. Her phone was the only link to her old life. She had to make the call. Abuelo, hi, it's me. She forced her voice to be light. Yes, I'm fine. Listen, the restaurant, they're doing a huge private event in Atlantic City. They need me to cover night shifts for 2 weeks. The pay it's amazing. I couldn't say no. The lie tasted like ash. But her grandfather's relief was immediate. Oh, that's wonderful. Mija, don't you worry about me. A very nice woman, a nurse. Just left. Mr. DiMaggio sent her. He heard about my lungs at the restaurant. Such a gentleman. She says my oxygen levels are the best they've been in a year. Olivia closed her eyes. It was done. A chain, forged from kindness, wrapped around her ankle. Luca was not just protecting her. He was providing for her. It was the most effective prison of all. They fell into a strange, tense domesticity. Luca spent his days on the phone, his voice a low, lethal murmur as he managed his empire from this glass box. Olivia explored the house, which was sterile and cold. except for the kitchen. It was stocked like a 5-star restaurant. That night, she watched him pace, his expensive suit replaced by a simple black Henley that stretched across his shoulders. "You're not eating," she said. "I'll have Santo bring something." "No, you're a hostage, too. You just don't know it." She opened the pantry, pushing past the vacuum-sealed jars of truffles and imported pastas. She found what she was looking for, a can of Chef Boyardee ravioli. She microwaved it in a bowl and slid it onto the marble island in front of him. He stared at it. "This is a joke. This is what I ate 3 times a week before you decided to buy my life," she said, her voice flat. "Eat it. I'm tired of you pretending you're not in this mess with me." He picked up the fork. He ate the entire lukewarm bowl without a word. It was a truce, an act of grounding. Later, they stood by the massive window, watching the dark ocean. "Alessia loved the water," he said, his voice quiet. Olivia waited. "The explosion," he said. "In 2009. It wasn't an accident. I told you that. It was tied to a group. They called themselves the Bureau of Urban Integrity, the BUI, a government agency, a ghost agency. They didn't exist, but they had badges, warrants, and a lot of guns. They showed up claiming to consult on port security, rooting out domestic threats. What they were really doing was giving a green light to whichever crew paid them the most. They were parasites, cleaning everyone out." He turned from the window to look at her. Alessia. She was smart, too smart. She found out what they were, that they weren't just taking bribes. They were running their own logistics, using our routes, under our noses. He paused, and his jaw tightened. And they used the Seraph's motto as their internal signal, Semper Aportu. They stole it, twisted it. It was their cover to get access to the piers. When you walked in with that on your arm, I didn't just see my sister. I saw them. I thought they were back, or that you were one of them sent to mock me. Olivia finally understood the depth of his reaction. It wasn't just grief. It was the return of a betrayal that had defined his entire life. "You're not the monster they say you are," she whispered. "You're just the one who survived." "Surviving makes you the monster," he replied. The third night, the storm hit. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was a horizontal assault. The wind howled like a living thing, and the waves crashed so hard she could feel the vibration through the concrete foundation. The lights flickered, died, and then came back on, powered by the house's generator. Then a new sound, a sharp, repetitive beep. A small red light pulsed on a security panel by the door. "Perimeter breach," Luca said. He was on his feet instantly. He moved to the biometric safe she had noticed, his hand pressing against it. A click, and he retrieved a black, heavy-looking pistol. "Get in the bedroom, now." "What is it?" "It's Luciano's men, or the storm," he said. "I'm not taking the chance. The bedroom is a reinforced safe room. Go." He pushed her inside and followed, locking the heavy door behind them. He went to a monitor on the wall, tapping through security feeds. "It's nothing," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "A branch took down the fence on the north side, but the storm is scrambling the sensors. I can't get a clear feed. I have to stay by the main panel." The main panel was in this room. They were trapped together. Hours passed. The storm raged. Olivia was shivering, dressed in a thin t-shirt Luca had given her to sleep in. He sat in a chair by the window, the gun resting on his thigh, watching the darkness. She couldn't sleep. She got up and went to the minibar in the corner, pouring a glass of water, her hand shaking. "You should sleep," he said, "and you should stop acting like a bodyguard. It's what I am. Ragazza." She stood in front of him, the tension in the room so thick it was suffocating. "Why?" she asked. "Why go through all this for me? I'm just a waitress." He looked up at her, his eyes dark, reflecting the flashing red light of the panel. "Because you're the first thing in 15 years that's made sense. Because you wear her memory, and you're not afraid. And because I won't let another person wearing that mark die on my watch." He stood up, and he was too close. The air between them was static. She could feel the heat of his body, smell the faint scent of brandy and the sharper, metallic scent of the gun oil. "You're shaking," he murmured. I'm cold." He didn't offer her a blanket. His hand came up, not to her face, but to her back. His palm splayed wide between her shoulder blades, pulling her against him. Her breath hitched. "This is crazy," she whispered, her hands on his chest, feeling the solid, unforgiving muscle. This was inevitable. He breathed, and he kissed her. It was not the chaste, possessive kiss on her wrist. This was a claiming. It was rough and deep and desperate. All the tension of the last 3 days, all the fear and the forced proximity, exploded. Her hands, which had meant to push him away, fisted in his shirt, his other hand clamped around her waist, locking her hips to his, lifting her slightly. A low groan rumbled in his chest. This was not romance. It was possession. It was the heat of 2 bodies that had been circling each other in a cage, finally colliding. The storm outside and the storm inside merged. She felt his fingers dig into her waist as she arched into him, her mouth opening under his. She pulled him closer, her body humming with a terrifying, electric current. His mouth left hers, trailing a hot path down her jaw, to the frantic pulse in her throat. He smelled of power and safety and unbelievable danger. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. They were both breathing hard. The only sound was the rain and the steady, insistent beep of the alarm panel. The next morning, the storm was gone. The sun was bright, the sea a calm, glittering blue. She woke up in the massive bed, tangled in the sheets, alone. She found him in the kitchen, making coffee. He wasn't awkward. He wasn't apologetic. He just handed her a mug. "It happened," he said. "It was a fact, like the storm." She took the coffee, her hand steady. "I'm not your prisoner. Luca, I'm not this. I know." He looked at her, and his eyes were clear. "Luciano isn't your only problem. This BUI, this ghost. If they're back, you're in more danger than you know. But you're right. You're not a prisoner. I still want to be a nurse," she said, needing to claim some part of her old self. "I've already made the arrangements," he said, turning to look out the window. "Academia, Harborview Medical. It's a private college. Much better than your community program. Your classes are scheduled. Your transfer is approved, all paid for." She stared at him. Another tie, another golden chain. He was giving her everything she ever wanted, and in doing so, he was making sure she could never leave. Luca DiMaggio was a man who lived by reputation. Reputation was currency. It was leverage. And in the space of 24 hours, his was taking a beating. "It's everywhere," Santo said, his voice flat. He stood in the safe house kitchen, holding a tablet. Every underground forum, every private chat from here to Baltimore. He turned the screen. It was a grainy video, clearly filmed on a phone from across the restaurant. It showed the confrontation at La Sirena, but it was cleverly edited. It showed Damon Keller shoving the table. It showed the wine spill. It showed Olivia stepping between them, but it cut out the moment her sleeve tore. It cut out the tattoo. All the video showed was a waitress intervening, and then Damon and his crew backing off, laughing, as Luca stood there soaked in cheap wine. The caption, translated from a dozen languages, was the same, "The Dawn of the Docks," saved by a $20 an hour waitress. Luciano wasn't just trying to be an annoyance. He was painting Luca as weak, as a man who couldn't handle his own business on another man's turf. In their world, weakness was an invitation for sharks to feed. "He's trying to make me look like a fool," Luca said, his voice a low growl. "He thinks he's baiting me. It's not just Luciano," Santo said, swiping to a different screen. "This is worse." It was an internal memo, forwarded from one of Luca's contacts deep inside the Harborview Port Authority. "We're getting inquiries," Santo read. "From a federal unit, new one, Northeast Organized Crime Response Division, no CRD. They're not asking about the fight, they're asking about you, and a female companion with a classical port insignia tattoo." Olivia, who had been listening from the counter, felt her blood run cold. This wasn't local thugs anymore. This was the government. Feds, Luca spat. "So Luciano's video brings the street-level heat, and something else brings the federal heat, all at once, all from that night." He paced the length of the glass wall, the ocean a cold blue backdrop to his fury. He stopped, staring at his own reflection. No, this isn't a coincidence. He turned to Santo. That night, at La Sirena. I went alone. I never go alone. I made the decision at 7 p.m., last minute. I told no one but my driver, who was on Luciano's payroll, and one other person. The air in the room became heavy. Who? Santo asked. The one who handles my schedule? The one who moves my money? Luca said, his eyes turning to ice. Marla. Santo looked like he'd been slapped. Marla Ciotti. She's been with your family for a decade. Find her, Luca ordered. Now. Santo found her 2 hours later at a day spa in North Seabright, paying for a seaweed wrap with a brand new credit card. They brought her to the safe house. Olivia was sent to the bedroom, but she heard the raised voices. Marla's, high and terrified. Luca's, a terrifying, quiet rumble. When Luca finally came into the bedroom an hour later, his face was carved from stone. You were right, he said to Olivia, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched. She's the one who told Luciano. She's been skimming for 6 months, Luca said, disgust in his voice. Luciano found out and gave her a choice work for him or swim. She told him I'd be at La Sirena, alone, vulnerable. She gave him the opportunity to humiliate me. He sat down, not on the bed, but in the chair opposite her. But that's not all. After the fight, she told him what her source saw. She told him about the tattoo. He leaned forward, his eyes locking on hers. Luciano isn't just trying to make me look weak. He's scared. He wanted you snatched from that parking lot because he thinks you are BUI. He thinks you're an old ghost agent and that I'm your new handler. The room spun. He thinks I'm a spook. I'm a nursing student. He thinks I'm using you and your legendary tattoo to signal a war. Marla confirmed it. He's digging up every file he has on the Bureau of Urban Integrity, trying to figure out who you are. A frustrated, terrified laugh escaped Olivia's lips. So I'm trapped. I'm trapped in this glass box. Luciano's crew wants to kill me because they think I'm some kind of super spy, and the actual feds are hunting me for what? Having the same ink? I am protecting you, Luca roared, standing up. You're hiding me, she yelled, jumping to her feet. This isn't protection, it's a cage. I'm not some porcelain doll you get to lock away. Luca, I'm the one they're all looking for. I'm the one with the key, and you've got me in here learning how to use a French press. You don't know what you're asking. You don't know what these people are. I know what I am. I've spent 8 years serving drunks, dodging hands, and reading the tells of every 2-bit con artist in Harborview. I can spot a liar from 20 feet away. I can read people. Let me do something other than wait to be rescued. She was in his face now, jabbing a finger at his chest. I am tired of being the object. I'm the one who stopped the fight. I'm the one who survived the parking lot. I am not your dead sister. The words hit him harder than a fist. He grabbed her, his hands clamping down on her arms, pulling her flush against him. Do not say her name. Then stop treating me like her ghost. The argument was raw, vibrating with fear and the adrenaline of the past week. It was too close, too hot. She shoved at his chest, and he just held her tighter, his hands moving from her arms to lock around her hips, anchoring her to him. You're right, he hissed, his face inches from hers. You're not her. She stopped pushing. Her hands were trapped against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering. She looked up, and his anger was gone, replaced by the same raw, possessive hunger she'd felt in the penthouse. Let me go, she whispered, but her hands didn't push. They slid up, over his shoulders, her fingers curling around the back of his neck. I can't, he murmured. He kissed her. It was a collision, a surrender to the tension that had been building since the storm. It was hard and deep, a battle for control that both of them lost. His grip on her hips was bruising. Her nails dug into his neck. It was a kiss that tasted of frustration and fear and a desperate, undeniable claim. His breath was hot on her collarbone as he moved his mouth from hers, trailing fire down her throat. She pulled his head back up, her breath coming in gasps, and kissed him again, taking the control. He let her, his body molding against hers, a silent admission of defeat. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing heavily, the argument forgotten, replaced by this new, dangerous truth. "Okay," he said, his voice rough. He let go of her hips, but his hands stayed on her waist. No more hiding. He was true to his word. He stopped treating her like a hostage. He treated her like an associate. He brought Santo to the safe house for briefings, and he let Olivia sit in. "This is the family crest for the Tavianis," he explained that night, pointing to a photo on his laptop. "They run the South Channel. They use a seagull. The O'Malleys. They run the Irish-owned tugs. Theirs is a knot. You need to know them all." She soaked it up, her mind, trained for anatomy and pharmacology, easily memorizing the complex social structure of the docks. She was a quick study. She was an asset. The new arrangement lasted for 2 days. On the third day, a secure courier, not from Luca, arrived. He delivered a single, thick cream-colored envelope addressed to Miss Olivia Rivera, CO the Dean's Office, Academia, Harborview Medical. It was from the United States Department of Justice. "They want to talk to me," she said, her hands shaking as she read the letter. "It's not a request, it's a summons. They want me to come to their field office to discuss matters pertaining to an ongoing investigation. They found me." Luca took the letter. He read it, and his face hardened. "They didn't find you because of Luciano. They found you because of your new school. They're watching everything." He pointed to the last line. "They're investigating the BUI," he said. "They found a leaked file from 2009, and your tattoo, the Sempre Portu, is listed in that file as a known operative identifier." The game had changed. It was no longer a fight between La Serena and a rival crew. It was about who had used that symbol, her grandfather's symbol, to set the entire port on fire all those years ago. And now, the feds thought the answer was her. The NOCRD field office was a temporary trailer parked on a desolate pier, smelling of stale coffee and damp drywall. It was the absolute opposite of Luca's penthouse. Agent Caleb Dorsey was a man in a rumpled suit who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't offer her a drink. He just motioned for her to sit and slid a photograph across the metal desk. 2009, and he said, "Luciano Quarter's crew, at a dockside party, long before he was the boss." Olivia looked. It was a grainy photo, a younger, thinner. Luciano was in the background, but Dorsey tapped his finger on a woman in the foreground, laughing and holding a beer. She was wearing a tank top, and on her right wrist was a familiar, stylized phoenix. "Sempre Portu." "I don't understand," Olivia whispered. "Who is that?" "Special Agent Myra Hess, Bureau of Urban Integrity. She was deep undercover with Luciano's organization for 18 months. The blood drained from Olivia's face. "The BUI. She was one of them." "She was them," Dorsey corrected. "The BUI was a rogue outfit, half real, half myth. They used that tattoo, the Seraph's motto, as an identifier for their embedded agents, a way to prove they were sanctioned to the local crews they were extorting. Your grandfather's rescue squad motto was just a convenient piece of local history they stole for a cover story." It all clicked. Why Luciano's men feared it. Why Luca recognized it. It wasn't just his sisters. It was the brand of the very people who had infested his world. "This is what connects to Alicia DiMaggio's death," Dorsey said, his voice quiet. "We believe she found out about Agent Hess. We believe she was going to expose the BUI. And so, they silenced her. We've been trying to unlock this case for a decade. Then you show up, wearing the same ink at the center of a turf war, next to the only other survivor." He leaned forward. "I need you to be voluntary bait. Bait." "Luciano is spooked. He thinks you're a ghost. We need to confirm who else is. There's a port charity dinner in 2 days. Luciano will be there. The man we think ran the BUI will be there. We need you to walk in on Luca DiMaggio's arm, wearing that tattoo for all the world to see. We just want to see who reacts. You want me to walk into a room of killers. You'll be in a room with a dozen of my agents," Dorsey said, "and you'll be with the most dangerous man in the room. You'll be safe." Olivia thought for a long moment. This was the only way out. Not hiding, walking through. "I'll do it," she said, "but I have 2 conditions." Dorsey raised an eyebrow. "First, my grandfather. You don't go near him. His nursing care. His apartment. It's a firewall. No one touches him. Second," she took a breath, "when this is over, you may get Luca on logistics charges, or whatever it is you do, but you will not arrest him in front of me. You will not humiliate him. That's the deal." Dorsey stared at her. She wasn't a witness. She was a player. She had chosen her side. "Deal," he said. Luca was furious. When she returned to the safe house and told him, his rage was a cold, silent thing. "You went to the feds," he stated. He wasn't yelling. He was worse. "They summoned me. Luca, they already knew about the tattoo. They knew about the BUI. They are the enemy. They are no different from Luciano. They use you. They drain you. And they throw you away. They want the same thing we do," she shot back. "They want to know who killed Alessia. Don't you—" She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. "I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for her. For you. I want to know who gave the order. I want the name of the man who used my grandfather's history to murder your sister." His anger fractured, the ice cracking. He saw the truth in her eyes. She hadn't betrayed him. She was trying to free him. He nodded once. He also wanted to know which part of the shadow government had signed his sister's death warrant. "If we're going to do this," he said, his voice rough, "we do it my way." That night, he broke open his own archives, not files, old dusty VHS tapes from the port's original security system, dated 2009. For hours, they watched grainy, time-lapsed footage of the warehouse where Alicia had died. "There," Olivia said, pointing. "Rewind." He rewound, then played it frame by frame. There, in the flickering, low-resolution black and white, captured by a camera 200 yards away. 11:03 p.m. Just moments before the explosion, it was Alessia. She was standing by a loading bay, in a heated argument with a man. The man's face was lost to shadow, but the side of his windbreaker was visible. On his sleeve was a patch, a phoenix, the BUI insignia. Olivia stared at the screen, at the ghostly image of this woman she'd never met. She was confronting him. Olivia whispered. She knew, and she went right at him. She looked at Luca. "Just like at the restaurant. All I could think was that I had to stop that man, Damon, from getting to you. I just stepped in." That's what she was doing. Wasn't she stepping between the madmen and the violence? The parallel hung in the air between them, heavy and real. Later, they sat on the sofa, the television off, the only sound the distant surf. "What if no one stands in the middle?" she asked, the question aimed at the darkness. "Then everything burns," Luca answered. He looked at her, and the last of his armor fell away. He didn't see a tool. He didn't see a key. He saw her. He reached out, his hand covering hers. It wasn't a prelude to passion. It was a connection, a simple, human acknowledgement. She laced her fingers with his. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," he said. He pulled her closer, not into a desperate kiss, but into an embrace. She rested her head on his chest, her arms sliding around his waist, holding on. He wrapped his arms around her. One hand splayed across her back, the other stroking her hair. They stayed like that for a long time, a silent conversation passing through touch. He felt the slight, exhausted tremor in her lower back and pulled her tighter, as if he could absorb it. She felt the steady, slow beat of his heart under her ear, a rhythm that grounded her. It was a slow, thirsty comfort, a pooling of warmth and strength between two people who were, in that moment, the only allies they had. He kissed the top of her head, his breath stirring her hair, and they just held each other, the tension of the night draining away, replaced by a single, shared certainty. The next morning, Luca was all business, but it was a new business, a shared one. He made a call, not to Santo, but to a number he hadn't dialed in a decade, a man who existed in the gray spaces between the government and the underworld. "I need a name," Luca said, his voice flat. "BUI, 2009, Harborview warehouse explosion, the man running the op." He listened for 5 minutes, saying nothing. Then he hung up. He looked at Olivia, who was standing by the coffee maker. "We have him," Luca said. "The man Alessia was arguing with, the man who ran the BUI Ghost Unit. His name is Director Phineas Laura." He paused, and his eyes were cold fire. "And do you know what his job is now?" "He's a private security consultant. His primary client is Luciano Quarter." The circle was closed. The enemy had a face. The Baylight Harbor Hotel was neutral ground, which meant everyone was armed and polite. The annual Port Authority Benevolent Fund dinner was Luciano Quarter's masterpiece of public relations, a $100,000 a plate gala designed to wash his reputation clean in front of the city's political and financial elite. In reality, it was a gauntlet. It was Luciano's stage to celebrate his new alliance with Phineas Laura and to publicly display the weakness of his rival, Luca DiMaggio. "He's expecting me to hide," Luca said, standing in the safe house, adjusting his cufflinks. "He thinks I'm humiliated. He thinks I'm afraid." "And you're not," Olivia said, her voice quiet. She was standing by the window. "I'm going to walk into his party, on his stage, and I'm going to show him who really controls the water." He turned to her. On the bed lay a dress. It was not a dress a waitress could afford. It was a sheath of deep, navy blue silk, custom made, with a simple, elegant cut that left the arms bare. "And you are going with me." This was the American way. The Boss Takes the Waitress was a story as old as the country, but this wasn't a fairy tale. The dress was armor. When their sedan pulled up to the hotel's grand entrance, the flashbulbs were a blinding storm. The local paparazzi, fed for weeks on the rumor of the La Serena incident, surged. Luca stepped out, a figure of absolute, unbothered power. He turned and offered his hand. Olivia took it. She emerged from the car, and the cameras went silent for a half-second, replaced by a frantic clicking. This was not the disheveled waitress from the rumors. This was a queen. The silk clung to her, and the light caught the dark. Intricate ink on her right wrist. The whispers started immediately. "That's her. That's the one. Who is she?" They walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of black ties and diamonds. Agent Dorsey and his NOCRD team were already there, scattered, disguised as waiters, busboys, and security. Across the room, Director Phineas Laura was holding a champagne flute, laughing with a city councilman. He saw Luca enter and his smile tightened. Then he saw Olivia. His gaze drifted from her face, to her hand on Luca's arm, to her exposed wrist. The color drained from his face. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. He was staring at the Sempre Portu tattoo, not with recognition, but with pure, superstitious terror. He was looking at the insignia of the ghost unit he had created and buried, now walking toward him on the arm of the one man who had a right to want him dead. "He's our man," Luca murmured to Olivia, not even looking at Laura. "He's terrified." Before they had taken 10 steps, Luciano Quarter intercepted them. He was smiling, his arms wide, a picture of false welcome. "DiMaggio, I'm so glad you could make it," Luciano boomed, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I was worried you'd be tied up. I hope the service is to your liking tonight." He leaned in, his voice a greasy whisper. "Let me know if you have any trouble with the bill. I'll cover you." The insult hung in the air. Luca smiled. It was a cold, bright expression. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he placed his hand on the small of Olivia's back, a gesture of pure, public possession. "No need, Luciano," Luca said, his voice clear and smooth, carrying over the music. "I have everything I need right here." He looked at Olivia, his gaze softening just enough for her to feel it. "In fact, I should be thanking you. My dinner was almost ruined the other night, but Miss Rivera," he stressed her name, "she saved the entire evening." It was a public acknowledgement, a claiming. He turned Luciano's mockery into a public statement of her value. Olivia's heart, which had been hammering with fear, steadied. She was not his prisoner. She was his partner. While Luca held the floor, Santo Vega was not inside. He was in the hotel's security hub. Having convinced the night manager to let him watch the feeds, he saw Laura's panic, he saw Luciano's posturing, and he saw something else. A figure, dressed in hotel catering staff attire, exiting the ballroom and heading for the service elevator to the roof terrace. Marla, Santo hissed. He moved, catching her as she fumbled with the terrace door, a long, heavy-duty case in her hand. It was a sniper's rifle. She was clumsy, terrified, an amateur. Santo disarmed her in 2 seconds, his hand clamping over her mouth, dragging her back into a linen closet. "Luca should have killed you," he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. He didn't kill her. He bound her, gagged her, and carried her out through the loading dock. By the time Luca and Olivia returned to the safe house, the adrenaline of the party evaporating, Marla Ciotti was tied to a chair in the kitchen. She broke in 30 seconds. "He was going to kill me," she sobbed, mascara running down her face. "Luciano, he said Laura was panicking, that he saw the girl, that she was a ghost. He said I had to clean up the mess. I had to get rid of her." "Get rid of who?" Luca asked, his voice deathly quiet. "The girl, the waitress," Marla cried. "He's terrified of her. He thinks she's a signal. He thinks you and the feds are setting him up. He's moving everything. He's clearing out." Luca and Santo exchanged a look. "When?" "Tomorrow night, Pier 17B. He's moving his entire weapons cache. He's running. Luca, he's taking everything and running." This was it, the entire network, the heart of Luciano's operation, laid bare. "We hit him," Santo said. Luca was silent. He looked at Olivia, who stood by the counter, her navy silk dress now looking like a costume from another life. He had just taken her into the fire. He couldn't throw her back in. "No," Luca said. "It's a trap. He's spooked. He'll be waiting." "We locked this place down. We let him run. She's the priority." "No," Olivia said. Both men turned to look at her. "No," she said again, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "You don't hide me. Not now. You said my normal life was over. You're right, but I'll be damned if I spend the rest of my life in a safe house, waiting for the next Marla or the next Luciano. He's running. He's scared. That means we have him." She walked toward Luca, her eyes blazing. "You want to end this. You want justice for Alessia. We end this now. We don't let him run. We don't let Laura get away. We finish it." Luca looked at her, at this woman who had been a waitress 2 weeks ago, now planning a war. He saw the same steel he'd seen in his sister. He nodded. "Santo, get me Dorsey on the line. We're going to plan a party." The plan was a dual-pronged strike. NOCRD would set up a federal perimeter, cameras running, ready to catch Laura when he inevitably showed up to oversee the move. Luca's team would handle the internal logistics, dismantling Luciano's crew. And Olivia, she had the most important role. "The men who ran from you at La Sirena," Luca explained. "They weren't just scared of you. They were scared of that." He pointed to her wrist. "They're superstitious. They were raised on stories of the port seraphs. They believe that tattoo is a holy symbol. You won't be in the fight, but you will be seen. You will be our living symbol. When they see you, they'll hesitate. And that's all the time we'll need." Pier 17B was a graveyard. A line of rusted, skeletal cranes stood silent against the skyline, and the warehouses were half collapsed, monuments to dead industry. This was where Alicia DiMaggio had died, and tonight, it was where Luciano Quarter was trying to save his own life. The rain was a cold, driving sheet, turning the broken asphalt into a black mirror. Luca's team, 10 of his best, moved like shadows, securing the perimeter. Further back, in the ruins of a container office, Agent Dorsey and his NOCRD team set up their long-range cameras, their mission clear capture, Phineas Laura. Olivia was in the back of an armored Escalade, parked 100 yards from the main warehouse. Her door was unlocked. Her job was to wait. Luca had given her a simple black jacket, and before he'd left, he'd gripped her arm. "When the time comes, be seen. That's all. Be seen. And then get back in." The plan went to hell in 3 minutes. Luciano's crew was paranoid. One of his men, posted on a rooftop with night vision goggles, spotted the faint infrared glint of a no-surdy drone. "Feds," a shout echoed across the pier. It's a setup where pinched floodlights, powered by a generator, roared to life, bathing the entire pier in a harsh, sterile white. The operation was blown. "Go-go," Luca roared into his comms. The night exploded in gunfire. Luciano's men, caught between moving containers and Luca's advancing team, returned fire. Bullets ricocheted off the steel shipping containers with sharp, metallic pings. "Kill DiMaggio!" Luciano screamed, firing a pistol wildly from the cover of a forklift. "He brought the feds! Kill him!" Luca was pinned behind an old concrete barrier. 3 of Luciano's men, the heaviest hitters, broke from cover and advanced on his position, their automatic weapons spitting fire. This was it. Olivia's heart was in her throat. She kicked open the Escalade door. Now she heard Santo yell into his own mic, "Get her out!" One of Luca's men grabbed her, shoving her forward into the edge of the floodlights. She didn't have to do anything, she just stood there, caught in the rain. The black jacket open, her right arm hanging at her side. The 3 men advancing on Luca stopped. They literally skidded to a halt on the wet pavement, their weapons lowering. They were older. They were not the young, stupid thugs from the restaurant. These were men whose grandfathers had been fishermen. They stared at Olivia, at the phoenix on her wrist, illuminated in the chaos. It was their sacred history, standing in the middle of a gunfight. "Don't shoot," one of them yelled, holding his hand up to his own crew. "It's the Seraphs La Serpe." The hesitation was all Luca needed. His men, led by Santo, flanked them in a brutal, efficient takedown. The tattoo had, for the second time, saved his life. In the chaos, a figure broke from the warehouse, running not toward the fight, but away from it, toward the one building everyone avoided, the burned-out shell of Warehouse 4. Phineas Lore. "Santo, cover me," Luca yelled. He broke from his position, ignoring the gunfire, and sprinted after the man who had murdered his sister. Olivia watched him go. He was running into the dark, into the past. He wasn't a boss. He was an avenger. And he was going to kill Lori. "Stay in the car," Santo yelled at her. She ignored him. She ran, her feet slipping on the rain-slicked asphalt, following Luca into the mouth of the ruined building. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old fire, mildew, and stale water. The roof was gone in places, and the rain fell in a steady curtain through the charred rafters. She found them in the center of the vast, empty space. Lore had tripped and fallen over a piece of debris. Luca stood over him, his pistol aimed directly at Lore's face. She was unarmed. Luca's voice was a low, guttural sound, barely human. "She was my sister." "I didn't kill her," Lore shrieked, scrambling backward like a crab. "It wasn't me. It was the Bureau. She knew too much." "Knew what?" Luca advanced, his steps slow, measured. "The deal we were moving sanctioned." "Product," Lore confessed, his voice breaking. "An off-books arms deal. We used Luciano's crew for the labor, and the BUI provided the federal escort." "It was $1 billion arrangement, Alessia." "She found the manifests. She thought you were doing it, that you were betraying the family. She confronted me. She was going to expose the entire operation, bring down me, Luciano, and a dozen men in Washington. So you blew the warehouse," Luca stated. It was the only way to cover the deal to silence her. It was just business. Luca raised the pistol, his hand steady. He was no longer Luca. He was the angel of the port, come to collect a 15-year-old debt. "Luca, no," Olivia screamed from the shadows. He didn't flinch. He hadn't known she was there. "Don't do it," she ran toward him, stopping a few feet away. "If you kill him, you're just a gangster. If you kill him, no CRD will have you for murder 1. They'll bury you. Luca, they'll crush you and everything you've built. Let them do the dirty work. Let them have him. This is how you win." He was trembling, his arm locked, his finger tight on the trigger. He was at war with himself, the boss versus the brother. Olivia's plea had saved him, but it had also given Luciano time. Luciano appeared at the broken doorway, his face a mask of rage. He had seen them all run inside. "You set me up, DiMaggio. You brought the feds to my house." He didn't aim. He just started shooting, spraying the interior of the warehouse with wild, desperate gunfire. "Get down," Luca roared. He shoved Olivia behind a rusted-out generator block. Santo, who had followed Olivia in, returned fire toward the door. One of Luciano's bullets found its mark. Santo cried out, a sharp, choked sound, and collapsed, his hand clutching a dark, blossoming stain on his side. "Santo!" Luca yelled, torn between his man and Olivia. The warehouse, already soaked in spilled accelerant from Luciano's moving operation, found its spark. One of Luciano's bullets struck an old, live electrical panel. A shower of sparks erupted, hitting a pool of diesel fuel. With a sound like a giant's gasp, the entire back wall of the warehouse erupted in a sheet of orange flame. The old dry wood and oil-soaked concrete ignited instantly. "We have to move now," Luca yelled, pulling a tourniquet from his belt and strapping it desperately around Santo's thigh. The fire spread with unnatural speed, blocking the main doorway. Luciano was outside. Gunfire was outside. The fire was inside. "This way," Luca yelled, grabbing Santo and dragging him toward a collapsed sidewall. He shoved Santo through the opening. He turned back for Olivia. She was right behind him, but a flaming rafter, 20 feet long, crashed down from the ceiling. Blocking her path, it landed with a whoosh, creating a solid wall of fire between them. She was trapped. On one side, a raging inferno. On the other, the warehouse exit, where Luciano Corder was waiting with a gun. The warehouse air was thick with smoke and the metallic tang of fear. Luciano, his face a mask of primal rage, lunged. He did not go for Luca. He grabbed Olivia, yanking her back against his chest, the cold muzzle of his pistol jamming hard beneath her jaw. "Stop!" Luciano roared, his voice cracking. "Everybody stop or she dies, you!" He spat the word at Luca, who had frozen 10 yards away. "Because of your little whore. I lost everything, my whole shipment." Outside the shattered loading bay doors, the No CRD TAC team froze. Their lasers painted the concrete, but they could not risk a shot. Civilian hostage. The operation was compromised. Then, Luca DiMaggio did the unthinkable. He slowly raised his hands, palms open. He took one step forward, then another, emerging from the cover of a steel girder into the chaotic spotlight of the firefight. He unholstered his weapon, a heavy Beretta, and let it clatter to the ground. He kicked it away. "Let her go, Luciano." Luca's voice was unnervingly calm, a deep rumble beneath the shouting and the distant sirens. It was the first time any operative, any rival, had seen the head of the DiMaggio cooperative expose himself, unarmed, in the middle of a war zone. He was staring, not at Luciano's gun, but at the ink on Olivia's wrist, caught in the frantic grip of the man about to kill her. Luciano's arm trembled, high on adrenaline and fury. "I am ending this. DiMaggio, you took my port." Olivia's heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs would break, but the cold steel against her throat focused her. This was not a boardroom. This was Harborview. She knew what mattered here. "Look at it, Luciano," she gasped, her voice hoarse, nodding her head toward her own wrist. "You know this mark. This is not just ink." "Shut up," he screamed, pressing the gun harder. "It is the mark of the old families," she pushed on, her words sharp and desperate. "The ones who saved your father when the BUI tried to starve this port in the 90s. You shoot me. You are shooting the symbol that kept your own family alive. You pull that trigger, and you spit on your own father's legacy. Is that how a Harborview boss goes down?" It was a perfect strike. She had not appealed to his mercy. She had attacked his pride. Luciano's eyes, wild with rage, flickered to the tattoo. He recognized the stylized anchor and wave. His grip faltered for a single, fractional beat. It was all Luca needed. He did not hesitate. He moved like a panther, closing the distance in 3 explosive strides. He did not go for the gun. He slammed the heel of his palm upward into Luciano's elbow, shattering the arm's alignment. The gun fired, the bullet exploding harmlessly into the corrugated steel roof. Simultaneously, Luca drove his other hand, fingers rigid, into Luciano's throat. Luciano gagged, stumbling back, his grip on Olivia broken. Luca spun him around, drove a knee into his spine, and slammed him face first onto the concrete. There was no gunshot, just the brutal, efficient sound of close-quarters combat. Luca pinned the man's arms behind his back just as the No CRD team swarmed in, shouting commands. "He is alive!" Luca grunted, standing up and backing away as they slammed the cuffs on Luciano. "Just like you said." In the chaos, operatives grabbed Laura, Luciano's second-in-command, who was trying to crawl away. The game was over, with Laura in custody and Luciano talking to save his skin. The entire sealed BUI file from 2009 was cracked wide open. The truth about Alicia DiMaggio finally surfaced. She had not been a traitor. She had been executed by the same shadow agency that Laura had been feeding information to. A cleanup operation to hide decades of corruption. Later, Agent Thorne, his face grim, approached Luca. "You gave us a clean arrest, DiMaggio. No civilian casualties. Primary target alive. No CRD owes you." Luca just stared at Olivia, who was trembling, wrapped in a shock blanket. "The deal stands," Luca said, not looking at Thorne. "The DiMaggio Port Cooperative stays within Harborview. We keep the peace. You stay out. As long as you maintain the no harm to port civilians protocol," Thorne agreed. "We have bigger fish to fry, thanks to you." The fight was over, but the adrenaline was draining, leaving Olivia hollow and shaking. The sounds of the warehouse faded. Luca walked over to her, his expensive suit soaked in rain and grime. Without a word, he scooped her into his arms. He carried her out of the warehouse, past the screaming suspects and the shouting agents, into the driving rain. The flashing red and blue lights of the federal vehicles washed over them, painting them in strokes of color. His shirt was wet, but his chest was solid and warm. She buried her face in his neck, inhaling the scent of him rain, gunpowder, and safety. The safe house was quiet, the only sound the storm lashing against the windows. He set her down gently in the bathroom, his hands shaking as he unbuttoned her soaked flannel shirt. They were both bruised, adrenaline still vibrating under their skin. He cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. "You are okay," he whispered, more to himself than to her. She nodded, her hands coming up to grip his wrists. "You dropped your gun," she whispered, her voice thick with shock. You walked out. He had a gun to your throat," Luca said, his voice raw. "To that tattoo." He did not kiss her right away. He just held her face, his dark eyes cataloging every inch of her, as if committing her to memory, as if checking she was real. Then, his control broke, his mouth crashed down on hers, not gentle, but desperate and proprietary. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and relief, a raw claiming. His hands moved from her face, down her arms, his fingers trembling as they wrapped around her wrists, tracing the outline of the tattoo that had started it all. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. Their breath mingled. "You belong to my harbor," he murmured, his voice a possessive growl. "You belonged to me the moment you got that ink. You just did not know it." He kissed her again, slower this time, a deep, bruising exploration that left her boneless. His hands moved under her damp clothes, not with haste, but with a desperate need to feel the warm skin beneath, to reassure himself that she was alive, that she was whole. Every touch was a confirmation, every brush of skin a silent promise that the danger had passed. They held each other, bodies trembling from the sheer terror of almost losing one another, finding solace in the simple, undeniable proof of life. The next morning, Harborview woke to the news. The Harborview Post headline screamed, "Port Kingpin Luciano arrested in federal raid. Sources cite special cooperation with local port businessman L. DiMaggio." There was no mention of a waitress named Olivia, only the people who had been there, in the smoke and the rain, knew who had truly turned the tide. Olivia went back to La Sirena. A few weeks later, she was promoted to night manager. The tattoo was still on her wrist, a permanent mark of her past and her future. Sometimes, Luca would come in late, taking the table near the front glass, the one overlooking the water. He did not need to prove anything anymore. He just watched her work. They did not use words like boyfriend or lover. They just used names, and a shared look that spoke of fire and sacrifice and survival. The question lingered in the salty Harborview air, the kind of question that keeps people talking. If that tattoo had not been visible on that specific day, would they have ever met at all? Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below to say hello. Share your thoughts and connect with other listeners. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you enjoyed it, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.